A lot of people out there don't believe in monsters. They say that there's no such thing, that monsters are just a fabrication of the imagination, stories conjured to frighten or give body to the unknown. But I know better. I know that monsters do exist, because I saw one with my own eyes. It all happened last week. I was on my way to the new location for my job. I work as a guard for a major security company. I know that working as a security guard isn't a particularly glamorous profession, but it's easy and it pays the bills. I had been working with this company for quite a few years now and was somewhat proficient at my job. We had gotten word the week prior that there was an inner-city factory slated for reconstruction towards the end of the month. I was familiar with this location as I had driven by it for work many times. The building itself was rather large. It had a brick-and-mortar exterior, with large pane glass windows that adorned the sides. A high stone wall encompassed the entire structure, making looking inside difficult. Although it was certainly imposing, the building itself, for as long as I've lived there, had been abandoned. For years, that building was just a useless eyesore within the city, ever looming without a purpose. Apparently, a new company had saw the location as an opportunity for growth. They had purchased the structure, and from the sounds of it, they were going to remodel it and repurpose it for their own use. Since it was now privately owned, they wanted someone to oversee the security of the location until they could finish their plans for the building. This type of work wasn't exactly common, though not unheard of. Typically, it was a mall or a business requesting guards, not so much abandoned buildings. That being said, we have on rare occasions dealt with this type of request before. You'd be surprised at the lengths some companies would go through to protect their investments, even if they are abandoned. Shortly after the request came in, I was selected as the night shift guard, a position which I preferred actually. Not many things happened at night. The city is quieter, and I wouldn't have to worry about anyone bothering me. Although this job was an official request, the outline was somewhat sparse. Basically, the company that hired us just wanted us to patrol the outside and notify the authorities if we found anyone trespassing. Overall, it was quite simple. I had arrived at the location at around 7 p.m. One of my coworkers who had been selected for the day shift greeted me as I pulled up. I asked him if anything had happened, and he just responded by shaking his head. He took the last half hour of his shift to show me around the area. Like I mentioned previously, the area was quite large. It took us nearly 30 minutes just to traverse the exterior. After that, he handed me a set of keys which opened certain doors in the factory as well as the main gate. With that, he wished me luck and hopped in his car and drove away. For the first couple of hours, I just sat in my car parked near the main gate. I assumed that if someone were to break in, they probably wouldn't do it during the day. I watched a few TV shows on my phone until the sky had darkened and night was in full swing. At around 10 o'clock, I hopped out of my car and began my first patrol around the factory. As I walked, I shivered as the chilly air bit through my clothing. I zipped up my jacket and continued onward. Even though I was simply walking in a square, it still took me almost 30 minutes to complete it. The entire walk, I kept looking up at those high windows which lined the building. The dirt and grime covering them allowed no view inside. I eventually made it back to my car and decided I'd make another pass in an hour or so. The minutes ticked by and I once again stepped outside. I gingerly rubbed my eyes as the cold wind threatened to dry them out. About halfway through my walk around the building, I heard something which instantly drew my attention. It sounded like a door slamming shut, and the sound echoed through some of the broken glass windows. I paused for a moment, wondering if that noise would happen again. As I made my way back towards the entrance, I thought that perhaps the wind had gusted through there and pushed a door shut inside. Regardless, it was still my job to investigate and make sure nobody had slipped in when I wasn't looking. I pulled out the ring of keys and unlocked the large metal gate. With a piercing creak, I pushed the gate open. I walked across the small courtyard from the gate to the main doors of the building. Standing before this structure, I couldn't help but admire at the amount of work that had to have gone into its construction. I inspected the main doors to the factory and found them to still be locked. This hadn't been the source of the noise, nor a point of entry. I wondered if someone had gotten in through a window somewhere. I fumbled with the keys for a few moments before finding the correct one. I turned the knob and opened the door slowly. When I did, a gust of dust and stale air rushed against me before dissipating. After fishing my flashlight out of my pocket, I turned it on and walked further inside. The entire interior of the building appeared to have been gutted. All of the major machinery that probably once resided was now absent. Large pockets of vacant space were left in their place. Splintered wood and bits of broken glass dotted the floor, causing a healthy crunch underneath my feet. I scanned around for a few moments with my flashlight, and on the surface, I couldn't see anyone nearby. As I progressed further inward, I spotted a hallway which presumably led to some offices. One by one, I walked up and checked all the doors. All of them in the hallway seemed to be locked up tight. I was beginning to wonder if I had just imagined the sound I had heard earlier. As I turned to exit, that sound once again echoed, this time much louder behind me. It was coming from a door at the end of the hall. It sounded like something heavy had slammed up against it. A thought that maybe someone had broken in but had gotten stuck inside that room crossed my mind. I walked over to it and rifled the keys in my hand. After a few failed attempts at finding the correct key, one finally turned, and I could hear the bolt slide over. I pulled open the door and shined my light inside. I quickly realized that this was no office. It was a flight of stairs, leading down into some type of basement. As I stood at the top shining my light down, I called out to anyone down there. I told them that they should come out, that the police were on their way. The base of the stairs curved to the right, so my light didn't illuminate anything past that point. I waited for a few seconds, wondering who could have been causing those noises. Then, at the base of the stairs, I saw something. It was a face, peeking out from the darkened corner. It wasn't human. It looked like it was covered in oil. A black, viscous fluid glistened in the light and dripped from its face. Its eyes were far apart, wide, and bloodshot. They stared at me with a malicious curiosity. Then, a slender arm reached out, followed by a leg. It appeared like this thing was completely covered in this strange substance. It slowly crawled on all fours into the light, all without taking its eyes off of me. Then, it did something that sent warning alarms shoot throughout my entire body. It began to rotate its head. It tilted its head to the left, almost like a confused dog. Then, with a gut-wrenching crack, the head continued until it was completely upside down. In a flash, the creature began to climb rapidly up the stairs towards me. My instincts kicked in, and I reflexively slammed the door shut before it could reach the top. Another loud boom, much like the one I heard before, sounded, and I thought the door was going to fly off its hinges. I ran back down the hallway, trying to make it back to the front doors. About halfway through the main assembly area, I heard a new sound, one which caused goosebumps to stretch across my skin. It was the sound of the door behind me, slowly creaking open. I had forgotten to lock it. Even though the hallway was now completely dark, I knew that thing was in there watching me. I continued running, taking care not to lose my footing on all the debris. I made it through the entrance doors and slammed them shut behind me, making sure to lock them this time, though I wasn't sure how much good that would do with all the broken windows nearby. I ran through the gate and locked it as well before I made the last dash to my car. When I got inside, a wave of relief began to calm me down. I turned the ignition and waited for any sign of that thing to show up. Minutes turned to hours. and eventually the sun began to rise. I was startled by a sudden knock on my window which caused me to scream in a panic. It was my coworker who was there to start his shift. I rolled the window down and he asked me how it went. I just handed him the keys to the building and told him not to go inside. I drove home shortly after. When I made it home, I contacted my supervisor and told him that I had gotten sick, that I would be unable to work for a while. He told me he understood and that he'd find someone else to take my place for the time being. It's been a week since that day, and I've since found out that the company that hired us decided it would be much easier to just demolish the building and start from scratch. As a result, they have determined our services to be unnecessary. It had been slated to be demolished in a couple of days. When I heard the news, I was relieved. But that was until I had gotten home from working at a new location last night. As I pulled into my driveway, I couldn't help but shake nervously as I stared at the tar-like substance in the shape of a hand, which had been pressed against my bedroom window.